This is Ellen Morrow, and you're listening to The Pastor with No Answers.
All right, Ellen, this makes number 2 of being on the biggest podcast in iTunes. You do know that we get like 1.5 million downloads an hour. This podcast is huge. So you are a famous person, pretty much a celebrity. You didn't know it.
Is that real? That real?
Oh, no. Good gosh. This is fun. Let me think of what else I can say.
Well, that just goes to show I still haven't listened to it.
Right. There you go. There you go. Or do you even know what podcasting is? I know you're on Depolarized podcast. Do you know what you're doing?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do.
Awesome.
I had to explain to my dad the other day what a podcast was. So
Gotcha. Yeah, kind of radio on demand. I know there's a lot of folks in our parents' generation that they just have no concept of it at all. It's kind of neat. Well, you were on an episode
we can see.
semi-recently about the old Billy Graham rule, and that was a good conversation. But you had said something in that episode that I was super interested to take a little further, and that was a passing comment about you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but not agreeing with women lead pastors. Not women pastors, not women elders, but women lead pastors.
Like preaching pastors.
Yeah, preaching pastors, because women cannot preach. Exactly. So,
well, maybe I call it preaching pastors because of where I come from. That's a term, but
Gotcha.
I would say lead pastors, like head pastor.
Gotcha. Cool. So I want to explore that, but also talk about a lot of women leadership type stuff. And it's funny because I was thinking about this, and I remember in 2008 when Sarah Palin came out as the vice presidential candidate. I was so conservative at that point in my life where I thought to myself, is this okay? Like, can I get on board with this? Is this bad? And I remember talking to another pastor who was more conservative and still is, and he was just like, oh yeah, I mean, haven't you read Deborah in the Bible? But basically he had to get on board because it was Republican. There was no choice.
Well, and the vice president doesn't really do anything anyway.
Right. That's true. So they can't mess anything up. Is that what you're saying, Ellen? I feel like I'm not. No, but so let's start there. As far as let's even back up further. Would you say that male and females are inherently different? And if so, how do you take in consideration uniqueness at the female level and uniqueness at the male level?
Well, I would say that I believe that men and women are all kinds of different at the very core, which is why we are man and woman and not just all one, what is it? What are we?
Human?
Yeah.
Humanity?
A human sex?
Yeah, there you go.
Intersexed?
Yeah, all right.
We probably shouldn't.
Actually, I just found out from a Bad Christian interview that hermaphrodite is no longer an acceptable term.
Oh yeah, you can't say that.
Yeah, but I knew that, but I didn't know the alternative word, so I had to say it and then be corrected. But it's intersexual.
Right.
Yep.
And I remember it because it's there's like things in there that we don't know about, that we can't see.
Yeah, don't need those hand motions, but continue, please.
So super different, but uniquely qualified in different ways and equally valuable, I would say.
All right, so equally valuable. So at home, let me give you a picture of our household, because I know a lot of people can jump to conclusions, especially in the South, and that's one thing we have to take in consideration. You are in the Northwest. Where are you from originally?
Seattle.
Okay. See, I'm from Charleston, South Carolina originally, and so two different worlds. But and my wife and I, we're going to talk about this on an upcoming episode of just how my the ladies in my family expected her to start learning how to cook, for instance, and to start building up a repertoire of recipes, and even asked, "Are you cooking for Joey?" and those sorts of things. And honestly, I was kind of along for the ride. And at that point, I was like, I guess that's okay. I mean, because that's all I ever knew. But in our household, it's just because I gravitate towards cutting the grass, I'm typically going to cut the grass just because I kind of took that responsibility. But I also take responsibility to wash the clothes sometimes. I made dinner tonight and washed the dishes because she was doing homework with the kids.
How many years of marriage, though, did it take for you to get to this point?
What I just described, I would say not doing it begrudgingly, probably in the last 8 years.
Wow.
I mean, because I think before that, I probably had in my head, and maybe I'm shortchanging myself. Maybe it's been longer than that, but I definitely for a while had in my head like, no, these are things that she should do most. No, here's the thing.
Now, was she not working? Did she not have a job?
Yeah,
or
that's what I think I recognized early on. It was like mathematics. I was like, I'm working a full-time job. She's working a full-time job. There's no reason why when we come home, our roles should look any different unless we both decide, hey, you're better at this, I'm better at this.
And were you taught that growing up that women should work? I mean, full-time? Was that a new concept to you when you got married?
It was probably something that seemed more normal for the woman to stay at home. But Priscilla and I had already talked before getting married. She was just like, I'm not doing that. And I was like, that's fine. Like, no big deal. Now, my mom, when my brother was born, my mom stopped being a school teacher and she didn't go back to work until I went off to college. So she made the decision she's going to stay home. And I'm thankful for that. I think I would have been okay without it, but I definitely benefited a great deal from her deciding to do that. Now, I think I am at a place now to where, well, I'll put it this way. I would say a good 10 years ago, I probably thought, you know what? That's probably the most admirable thing for a woman to do. And it is a sacrifice, and it doesn't make her
You're talking about when there's children.
Yes.
Because there is this whole stay-at-home wife thing, which is different than a stay-at-home mom. And I don't understand what stay-at-home wife is, but I know a lot of women in the South do it. And I know some rich bitches here that do it.
Right.
And I don't get it.
Right. Totally.
What are you doing all day?
Yeah, exactly.
Baking cookies is not a job.
Yeah. So this is definitely, after we had kids and everything. And yeah, I think that I thought to myself, that's probably the right thing to do. And honestly, and this is going to be interesting to talk to Priscilla about this too, but honestly, I think there was a part of her that saw other women who had this mentality of, I've got to work just as much as I ever have been because I can't take being at home all the time. It just drives me crazy. And it was kind of one of those, gosh, that's a horrible thing to say. But honestly, I think we're both recognizing now that there are some women that are definitely cut out and even desire to stay at home, be around the kids all the time, and they just flourish.
They love it.
They just love it.
They're probably the same women, though, that loved being pregnant.
Yeah, there you go. And then there's some women where it's just like, that was not my life's aspirations. Like, I love being a mom.
I just watched the new Ali Wong's Netflix special today. Do you know who Ali Wong is? Nope. She's a comedian. Nope. She's rad.
I don't think women are funny, but go ahead. I'm just kidding.
So she does this bit about how people were really surprised that she went back to work after her daughter was born.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh no, I have to come here in order to miss her. I love her so much, but I am on the verge of putting her in the garbage.
Oh my gosh.
So many women, I think, feel like that, where it's like, I love her so much and I love my kids so much, so I got to get out of here before I lose my mind, and I'm a bad mother. I mean, we're not, that was obviously comedy and extreme, but.
Right. No, for sure. That's
a thing.
So, surprisingly enough, my wife, and I say that because this just is not the stereotypical approach to male and female, but My wife is way handier than I am with tools and fixing things, and knows how way more qualified to brainstorm how to fix this, likes to learn how to do that sort of thing, where not only am I not good at it, but I just don't even like it. Now, there are times when I have to take one for the team, and I was so proud of myself. Like a year and a half ago, the washer machine was clogged. I YouTubed it. I fixed it. And it was like Priscilla was like, "That is so awesome, Joey. Good job. You did it." And
Awesome.
you can't be talking about that. Like, that is very shallow. Some women are good at fixing things, some aren't. Some men are good at fixing things, some aren't. Now, maybe more men are good at that kind of things. I don't know. But what are the inherent differences that you speak of?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's any news that women think differently than men.
Mm-hmm.
So we process things in a different way. My husband and I could not be more different in a way where, but the way we're different, I don't think, and I don't know, has to do with a man or woman.
Right.
He is he's an internal processor, and I, just blab out loud and then think things through as I'm saying them, which is why I just said, oh, women shouldn't be pastors.
Yeah.
And then I'm also really like, I always have strategies and I think in plans and all of this.
So
and
do
my
I.
husband just kind of wings it,
That's
Yeah.
Priscilla. So Priscilla's the winger and I'm the
Yeah.
planner.
So there's things like that, but that doesn't have to be, that's personality type.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think that and this is where I come down to getting a little bit confused about where I stand, I think, theologically and in the church, is I think I do believe that a woman has a supportive role in a marriage, not because women are lesser than or weaker and can only help, and that's what they're good at, and so that's what they should be doing. That's what I guess I should say. They shouldn't. It's not because they should be doing that. It's because I think that God has given women a particularly meaningful role of supporting men to be better men. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I know what you mean. And
it's very hard to explain without it sounding like I think that women should just submit to any asshole.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, totally. And this podcast, I like this conversation because it is a process out loud sort of podcast. And I think listeners are so crazy sometimes. They're just like, I can't believe he or she said that. It's like, it's because we're thinking out loud, you dummy. But so let me throw some examples at you, because it's crazy. Not only am I playing devil's advocate, but I think I disagree. So let me paint this picture. Ellen Morrow, famous author, New York Times bestseller. She wrote this book. It just exploded. Here's a documentary on her. Look at how faithful of a mother she is. Her and her husband have a great relationship. So you've got a balanced life, but you are Mrs. Fame. You're changing the world. And what's your husband's name?
Cole.
And is it okay for Cole to be like, man, that is badass. I like that. I want to support her in any and every way that I possibly can, and even take a back, like, I'm going to take a back seat to this and make sure that she can continue and flourish. And if I have to stay home with the kids more than she does, or if I have to do some of her administrative work. Now, obviously this is, y'all's personalities are different, but could that happen? Could he play?
Oh yeah, that has nothing to. I don't have any sort of socioeconomic opinions about women and men having different roles. I really don't. I don't think that. I mean, I grew up in a family where my dad was a pastor and my mom never had a job until she was like 45.
Yeah,
and she raised all of us, homeschooled us, and all of that. And that's what I think is normal. But I disagree. I mean, when Cole and I got married, poor guy was stuck in, he was going to school and he was working at Starbucks, which was the worst. And I was, quote unquote, the breadwinner.
Yeah.
And that was fine with both of us, except for I think it did lead to Cole feeling a little bit inadequate because he wanted to provide and he wasn't able to really do so. But just recently, I mean, we've been married for 6 years, and just in the last 6 months to a year, Cole is now like the breadwinner.
Yeah. So, but the scenario that I painted, wouldn't that be him having a supportive role for you?
Well, now that I know how hard being a mom is,
yeah,
and staying home most of the time, I don't see one being more supportive than the other.
Yeah.
I support my husband now by keeping his kid alive, right. Not totally trashing the house that he lives in. And he supports me by working super hard to make sure that I can, watch Netflix and, have food.
Yeah.
So I don't think that just by working and making money, you're the supporter.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
So what does it look like then for a woman to kind of be the inherent supporter of the husband? I'm trying to conceptualize like what that looks like. For example, Megan, I don't know if you know the Sheltons, but Devin Shelton, good friend of mine, friend of the Bad Christian Podcast, works with us, was in Emory and all that stuff. So he spent most of his career years in the 20s and 30s doing the band thing, and then when he settled down a little bit and started doing the dad-husband thing, she was I think it's a nurse practitioner. I don't know the difference between that and a physician's assistant, but I think she's a nurse practitioner. So here she is the main breadwinner, and there was a season of life, and they're still probably in it, where he spends most of the time at home as opposed to her, because she makes way more money, and that just works better. So it seems like in that, so what is that her supporting him?
No, I mean, they're both supporting each other.
I'm just trying to figure out what you're saying.
It exactly is, because if their personalities work to where they're each able to be in a role where they're contributing to the greater good of the family and they're not resenting each other because of it, that's the roles. Those are the roles for them.
So why isn't
you know what I mean?
Why can't we just say, oh, the wife submits the husband's vision and the husband submits the wife's vision?
You mean biblically? Why doesn't it say that?
Or just, okay, well, let's go biblically. So your beliefs are based on a biblical teaching. What is that biblical teaching?
I mean, loosely, yeah. I don't know how loosey-goosey we can get about scripture, but
right.
I do hold pretty firm that, and I hate even saying this out loud because he can hear it and I cringe hearing it.
Yeah.
But that the woman, I'll say in theory, should submit to the man, and the man should love the woman.
Right.
And that only works cyclically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I'm with you. And obviously you and I both know that at least in one of those accounts, if not both of them, it starts with, people need to submit to one another. And so there is a posture of submission that we all take, but that all should only come after they have a very grounded, loving relationship. Nobody should submit to anybody unless they have a very grounded, loving relationship and a mutual respect for each other. Right.
Period.
So with that passage, and I hear you, and I would say I'm at a place where I'm trying to refigure all this stuff out, because exactly what you're saying is exactly how I read all of that. And but where do we distinguish that passage from passages where it's women be silent at church altogether?
Right.
Like, I mean, how do we know when Paul is being cultural?
Well, here's an example, is because women being silent in church does not make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. But women submitting, air quotes, um, to her husband who loves and respects her slash supports her, that makes sense in sort of a life cycle, sort of a what women are gifted in versus what men are gifted in. That makes sense to me. But
Gotcha.
you're right. Just like old cultural rules don't make sense.
Right. So I think that's what's puzzling for me is that I know a lot of women that are not gifted in submission and they're married to men that are. Like
That you're talking to one.
right.
That's me.
So it seems like, and I consider you a friend, so I'm not trying to back you into a corner. I'm trying to figure
That's
this
nice,
out.
Joey. I didn't know we were
We are
friends.
friends. We're friends. Like it seems like you're putting, I can't hear it any other way of you're putting something in a box that I used to think, and I just don't even know where I'm at with all this stuff. But if there are some guys that are totally good with, you know what, and they're not being lazy, they're not being complacent, they're just like, yeah, my wife is super smart. I'll follow her lead 9 times out of 10. Yeah, there's some times where I'll push back a little bit because, we have some good dialogue. But for the most part, I just kind of like to be back behind the scenes and I trust my wife's judgment. I mean, is that okay? Or would you say that's a little contrary to how God has it set up?
I have never met any woman who is compassionate, loves Jesus, loves her family, and is kind, who would be totally okay with her husband just taking the back seat. And I say this because I experience being the kind of the overbearing one.
Yeah.
And I don't like to tell myself like, oh, I need to be submitting more. That's not an issue.
Yeah.
What my issue is like, how can I love my husband in a way to where he can feel like he does have a voice? Because I just steamrolled the poor guy constantly, and it hasn't really helped him grow to lead
Yeah.
in any way. And so part of the problem for sure. But I mean, I didn't marry someone just like me on purpose and probably by God's will. But I need to be encouraged and led. And just because I have a lot of opinions and I'm smart and outspoken, that doesn't mean that I should be the leader in a
Sure.
relationship. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Sure. Yeah. So is there something inherent in males outside of potentially a biblical mandate that makes them more qualified, regardless of their personality? Because I agree with you. I mean, just because you're more vocal and assertive and outspoken doesn't mean you're a great leader. You may very well be, but that's not what qualifies you as one.
Right.
Is there something inherent in males that does qualify them, or is it simply us all yielding to? No, I think that's how God has it put
Right.
together.
I think that's a good question. I think I often think about how boys and girls are different when they're raised. And not because we boys don't like trucks because we give them trucks.
Yeah.
Boys have a sort of innate interest in like loud stuff and cars and trucks in general. Not all boys, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There are differences that it's like you don't even have to be introduced to these things. We know just that boys tend to have more aggression than girls. They physically show
Yeah.
like anger and things in a different way than girls do growing up. So not that anger and rage is a great thing to just throttle you into leadership.
Yeah.
Actually, don't know why. I mean, I went to Mars Hill, so that does make sense to me, but it shouldn't at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think a huge learning experience that I had. A good friend of mine called me out on this, and it was off to the side. It was not confrontation. Well, I mean, it was kind of confrontational in nature, but he wasn't being super confrontational. He was just like, man, I just want to ask you what you meant by this and kind of talk to you about it. But basically it was when I was doing student ministry and he was assisting me in student ministry, and he heard me just say kind of passively, like, yeah, I mean, all of you guys, you're going to struggle with lust, and, you're going to, struggle with wanting to look at porn. And then, talked about purity and, started going the direction of all of those sorts of talks of, respecting women and all of that stuff. Well, what sent his antennas up into the skies? He said, you said that all guys will struggle with this. He said, I don't. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? He said, I don't struggle with the female body in the same way that other guys do. Now, he is heterosexually married, and it was just eye-opening how quickly I will put a certain gender or a certain demographic of people in a box and then just talk so passively about it, which can easily make people feel like, oh, well, I certainly can't express my opinion because I guess everybody is supposed to be a certain way. So that was just eye-opening for me as far as the gender stereotypes that I just accepted as being okay. And I'll give you some examples of how I'm correcting this as a father. Like, so I've got 2 boys and 2 girls. Even 4 years ago, I mean, that's embarrassing to say, just 4 years ago, I didn't even think to teach my girls how to use a screwdriver and how to put gas in the car. I was thinking, oh, well, I need to teach these things to my
the
boys
boys.
because that's the stuff that guys do, where I'm like, what if my daughter is single into her 30s?
So you're the problem.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm trying to rethink all of this stuff. And so, at the same time, I don't want to throw genders out of the window because that's no fun. Like, gender is fun. Like, females having some stuff, some common ground and everything, and acting a certain way in certain situations, or just, guys.
We've got intuitions that guys cannot touch.
Yes. But do you all? See, I think that I've met some guys, like what you just described. I think I know some guys that have that, and I think I know some women that don't. But I don't know.
I mean, I think it's okay to broad brush when we're talking about billions and billions of people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right, cool.
That's pretty broad.
No. Yeah. No, for sure. And we can talk this around in circles.
Also,
but
here's another thing to teach your girls. When they have their own car and they go to get their oil changed, this is the greatest thing my dad ever taught me. Say, nope, don't need it. Because some guy will come out and show you your air filter.
Right.
Every time. Because you're a girl, they're going to talk you into it. Because, look how dirty it is. Yeah. Say no every time.
Nope.
Save a ton of money.
There you go. And then there's going to be that one time, though, where you really needed to.
Yeah, I probably skipped it.
So, all right, women teaching men, can they? In the church context, can women teach men?
This is the only part of my worldview that I'm still confused about.
That's your way of saying embarrassed about. You know exactly what you believe.
I am embarrassed about it. I believe that everyone, it's the only thing I'm embarrassed about. I believe that everyone should, in theory, be able to do whatever they want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody, right? So, I'm all pro-gay marriage. I'm women's rights. Well, you and I both know I'm women's rights to, there's an end to that.
Yeah.
But women can be qualified and do have these skills and the personalities to preach sermons and to lead groups of people. However, I would feel really uncomfortable going to a church where there is a lead female pastor. Do I think it's wrong for women to become pastors? No. I just won't go to that church. You know what I mean?
Where they become pastors in general or lead pastors?
Sorry, I should say lead pastors, because I think with Pastor Chip, we were talking about how I was saying that there needs to be way more women in ministry.
Right. So personal preference or
Yeah, well,
theological belief, or you're
that's
still
what
trying to?
that's what I don't get. I don't think anywhere in the Bible does it say only men should be pastors,
Yeah.
but I also don't see any examples of women pastors. I see some deacons. In fact, my daughter's name is Phoebe, and Phoebe is a deacon in the Bible. And there's this really awesome letter that Paul writes to the church
Yeah.
saying, like, welcome her because she's done so good for so many.
Yeah.
Although I did name her after Phoebe Buffet. That was just after that. So I don't think that it's wrong, but I don't think that it's like this is where I'm stuck.
Yeah,
I
sure.
I would never go to a church with the lead woman pastor. And my very liberal Christian friends around are very like, Ellen, you're so conservative. Am
Yeah.
I? I mean, I guess I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And I want to applaud you just for being willing to express where you're at, and you could even be right. But bottom line is, it's a very unpopular opinion right now. Like especially in Seattle, there's not a lot of people saying, "Yeah, you get them, Ellen." Like a lot of people
Yeah.
are just like, "WTF is she talking about?" You know.
Yeah.
But I do think that I don't know.
But why, Joey? Why do I not want to go to that church? I think the only thing I can boil it down to is and I don't even know if I would feel this way if I was single, which would be interesting. Now that I'm almost 35, if I was single, I think I would feel completely differently, maybe. But as a a heterosexually married person, I can't imagine and this is, I hate that I'm even saying this right now, but I can't imagine my husband being led well by a woman. I realize what I'm saying, and I don't like that,
right.
but it's how I feel.
Right. Now, do you think that it's cultural? And when I say cultural, I mean from the church, cultural, and also from just society in general. Do you think you're culturally conditioned?
Oh, I absolutely think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up as a pastor's kid, and it was very much like, the pastor's wife was like a term, just like first lady. It's a
Right.
term that we
Right.
use.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that we underscore just how impactful that sort of cultural conditioning is, where it almost feels like right and wrong. When Matt Carter's mom passed away, I remember Toby and I both saying the same thing. We went to her funeral, and I'm telling you, there was not a better person to be in the position that their woman lead pastor was in. She pastored the hell out of us because it was a tragic, devastating loss. Matt's mom just passed away out of nowhere. She had, nobody knew she had any health conditions. She just had a heart attack, and that was it. And she was very influential in that church. A lot of people loved her. And that woman, she brought a femininity that just rattled everyone's cages in such a good way. I mean, I'm just listening to her, and I'm like, there's no other person that I would want to hear right now talk about this. And it was just, for me, it was almost like proof that male or female, just like Paul says, neither male nor female, matters. At that point in time, she was the person to pastor all of us.
Right.
And that was an experience that I had that I was like, man, because I totally understand. I have the same sort of cultural conditioning. Like I would say the church that I work with, even in the South, even, in the Bible Belt was for a while way more progressive than me, because we had women that we called pastors. And I remember even saying, that just doesn't sound right. And I hate that.
You know what I think it is, Joe? I think you need to get over it, and I think I need some exposure therapy.
Yeah.
And also I think my experiences with women pastors and women in leadership have been not great, because there is still, and I almost just said 1918. It's 2018,
Right.
and still there is this thing that happens when some women are in leadership roles where they're doing it just to prove that they can.
Right.
And there's this sort of angry lesbian stereotype. You know what I'm saying? And
So that's a
unfortunately,
homosexually oriented thing.
unfortunately, it is a stereotype, but I have experienced it, and they're not all lesbians. I love lesbians. But there's this angry woman like, "Fuck you, men. I can be, I can be whoever I want to be." And I think it comes from women being so oppressed for so long.
Yeah.
But as someone who doesn't think that like anger and rage is any way to accomplish your goals,
Yeah.
I just feel like they're ruining it for the rest of us. And they make it so that if I have another view, I'm wrong and I'm disgusting.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's not right either.
So if I have not met a woman pastor who is like super chill, kind, and loving, I'm sure there are thousands out there.
Yeah.
I've never met one. So this is why I feel the way that I do, probably. I think I just worked it out with you.
Yeah, there you go. Anytime I can do this for you.
Irony that I have met a lot of male pastors that are also angry and loud and terrible.
I don't know who that would be.
And that doesn't bother me. That doesn't seem to make me think that men shouldn't be lead pastors.
Right. I mean, that
doesn't make sense.
Again, it is. I don't know if you know you probably know them way better than me, by the way. Tricia Wilkerson, Jen Smith,
Mike Wilkerson, yeah,
some of these Mars Hill folks. I mean, both of the at least Jen Smith. I mean, her type of personality was not valued at Mars Hill because she was a very outspoken, outgoing, opinionated woman, while her husband was actually accused by Pastor Mark for being too reasonable. Like he was way more laid back, way more of a listener, way more behind the scenes. So it was like a certain type of personality was honored and revered by. Go ahead.
When we were talking to Chip, when I was telling you about our pre-marriage counseling at Mars Hill, and how it was like the male pastor that was doing all of it, and then doing all of the classes and the counseling, and the wife never even showed up.
Yeah.
And so that was Phil and Jen.
Gotcha.
So I don't know Jen by any means, but I would have, and who knows what was going on in her life, but I needed her there, and I didn't even know her.
Right.
But I needed her to be involved in all of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know her, and I'm sure that was not her intention, but I still kind of hold some resentment, I think.
Yeah. I need to get you two together then. And
I don't know. It might get ugly for a little bit.
Wow. Now I definitely need to. That'd be awesome.
That'd be a good episode.
Yeah. So I have somewhat of a theory, and it kind of depends on how people read the Bible, but obviously we know that women were not honored or esteemed in a healthy way back in Jesus's day. So I think the possibility is there that there could have been very strategic, influential women leadership in Jesus's inner core, that it just wasn't something that would have been recorded, because it's just like, dude, this dude is just way off. And if we put down that Mary Magdalene, and I'm just making an example, if we put down that Mary Magdalene was like his right-hand person, no one will believe Christianity, because that you just can't have.
I think that's possible.
Maybe sort of.
What are we supposed to do with that? Did God just expect us to assume that? I mean, that's where I get really tricky with semantic stuff. All we have to go off of is what we have.
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
I mean, of course, Jesus obviously respected women terribly and gave them a very important role in his story.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the most important role, really, but.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think what it goes back for, and it's hard to really wrap my mind around this, because I've always thought of God is God the Father, God the Father, God the Father, and white man with a big white beard. I got to get these images out of my head, but God is just as good of a mother as he is a father. I mean, obviously God is perfect, so he can mother us perfectly and he can father us perfectly. So I don't understand why the fatherly aspect would supersede the motherly aspect. And that's why
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think the shack especially, well, I didn't read the book. I just
Oh,
watched the
I
movie.
won't touch it.
The movie is just it does such a great job in showing the masculinity of God and the femininity of God. It is just unbelievable. You're like, why wouldn't it be that way? Why won't you touch the shack?
Sure.
Just heretical?
Oh, just as far as if I'm going to sit down and read a book, I'm not going to read something that kind of like just plays around with the story of God.
Yeah.
That's not interesting to me, and I think it's weird.
Yeah. I hear you. All right. Do you think in marriages in which both spouses are trying, so both of them are trying to be selfless, are emotional connectivity and sexual connectivity on equal playing field as far as the needs are concerned? So what I mean by that, and yeah, we just jumped into
Do they have equal needs?
Well,
Is that what you're asking?
well, here's when I'm doing premarital counseling, I am way more comfortable in telling the guy, dude, you need to connect with her emotionally, regardless of whether your needs are getting met. And that's now I remember why I wrote this down, because I had just come out of a premarital deal. But I'm way less apt to tell the woman the same thing about sex when it comes to not feeling emotionally connected. And the only reason being is that feels like the possibility of really feeling abused is in the mixed with that one. So in other words, if she becomes completely selfless and says, okay, I don't care if my husband is emotionally disconnected, I'm just going to totally give up my body in that sort of way.
Oh,
I think
and
that
be
can
abused,
be irreparable.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see them as two different categories, or are they both just that cyclical thing of healthy marriages and unhealthy marriages?
Man, it's so complicated. It's like it's all in the lymph nodes. I feel like you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
You cannot have a good physical relationship without recognizing each other's emotional needs, right?
Yeah, I think so. But for that, so if you have an unhealthy marriage in which both of these things are lacking, I think the common approach to this is, well, one of the partners can figure out how to jumpstart this by meeting the need of their spouse. So I guess what I'm saying when it comes to male and females stereotypical needs, I feel like we're on some dangerous territory if we were to tell the female, it doesn't matter how disconnected you feel. It doesn't matter that your husband ignores you. It doesn't matter that he doesn't ask you any questions.
You still need to put out.
Exactly.
This is what I would tell her. Let me come into your counseling session for a second. I would say, girl, shut up shop. You gotta close that shop up.
So that's what you would say.
I'm not a marriage counselor, but oh no. I mean, how personal can I be on this podcast?
That's totally up to you.
Okay. It's interesting to me how slowly a marriage can kind of go dry if you're not really. I hate to make the gardening reference,
right? But
you really got to water the garden,
right?
Because if you both neglect it because you just don't feel, you don't want to do too much, and then the other person feels like they're not doing anything, or you want to wait till the other person starts watering the garden before you water the garden. And then you're just sort of at a standoff. That's kind of where I'm at. And it's weird. It's really weird to have an otherwise very healthy relationship full of love and commitment. And then, you have a baby or you have a big, this was my situation, but, I have many friends that find out like their husband is dealing with pornography stuff, and then she's like, I'm not gonna let you have sex with me if all these images are in your mind. And then they have sex once in 2 years,
right?
And it's very tricky. And this is when I would love to have a woman pastor help me walk through this stuff, because my options at my church, for example, and there are a lot of women I could talk to, but the churches that I've been to, we would go and sit down with, you would sit down with a male pastor, and a male pastor,
right.
You're just like you said, they're going to really speak more to, in general, more to the husband, because it's like, you need to be leading your wife, or, in my experience, this. And you're right. We need more women pastors, Joey.
Yeah, well, and I think this is a perfect scenario in which the wife may very well wake up to the dryness of the marriage and say, shoot, we've got to figure this out. And the first step may be, let's just get some counseling. I love you. You love me. We can't just let our marriage go this way. We've got to go do something. And in that case, that's where everything seems to go out the door of the traditional roles of marriage. In my head, it seems like everything's out the window because the woman just stepped up to the plate and said, enough is enough.
She manned up, if you will.
Exactly. And you hate that terminology, I think.
I hate it.
Yeah.
But if a woman's manning up, I like it. Fine.
There you go. All right. Well, we just solved a bunch of problems. You now agree with lead pastors, and I
would say one more thing about that. I don't like that women, if women are the one to wake up in a dry marriage and realize, oh no, if he's not thinking about this, then it's kind of my responsibility to do something about this. All of my female friends would probably agree to this. I feel like women feel like they have to just kind of put out to get the marriage going again.
Which is why I use go get counseling as an example and not go have sex.
So that was, and that would be great. But I just don't think that women are able to say like, hey, our marriage isn't in a great spot. Would you like to go to counseling? Because if you've grown up in, church culture like us, the husband is sort of like, oh, if the pastor finds out this was your idea, I'm going to look like an asshole.
Right.
Yeah.
I
need some counseling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the pastor with no answers. You can't get any counseling from me.
Okay, let me get my husband on. Cole.
Well, this has been awesome. We should actually, I think it'd be interesting sometime to get you and Cole talking to Priscilla and I and
that would be
ironing some of this
so
stuff
good, Joey.
Would he open up a little bit? Because I know he's a little less talkative.
He would have to get to know you first.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Ellen, thank you very much.
You're welcome, buddy.
Good talking.
We're friends.
There you go.
You're welcome, friend.
There you go. And a second ago, I was like shaking my head, but that was not at you. That was at my son trying to get my attention. I was like, nope.